The story I'm about to tell happened over 30 years ago, and for the longest time, I buried it deep in my memory. It was painful to see how no one ever believed me. People called me crazy, said I just wanted attention. So, I did what anyone would do. I shoved those memories into a dark corner of my mind and tried to move on. But even after all these years, I never stopped paying attention, always on the lookout for any news, any messages on obscure forums, anything that might explain or help me make sense of what I saw that night. The reason I'm telling this story now? I found a post on a forum. Some guy said he stumbled upon a file he wasn't supposed to see, something pointing to the existence of something. Something nobody had ever spoken about before. I reached out to him, and that's when I knew. I wasn't crazy. He had proof. He was just as desperate as I was to find out more. It all went down in the summer of '93. My dad and I were road tripping through southern Nevada in his old but reliable van. Man, I loved that thing. Loved those trips. These days, with the whole van life craze, I can't help but feel nostalgic. My dad's gone now, but he left me a massive collection of books, stuff about everything under the sun. A lot of it was the kind of thing people laugh at, say it's all nonsense. He was obsessed with conspiracy theories, always digging into things most folks just wrote off as pure fantasy. Deep down, I think he knew it was probably all just stories, but I guess he liked having an escape from his own reality. That summer, while driving through Nevada, he couldn't resist pulling over near Area 51 to set up camp for the night. I remember being so hyped. My dad had filled my head with wild stories about the place, but when we got there, I felt nothing but disappointment. There was nothing to see. Just a bunch of warning signs, some fences, security cameras, and way off in the distance, a single shack sitting in the middle of the desert. Nowadays, I know everything happens underground, but back then, it was hard to picture. We sat by the tiny camping stove my dad always brought with him. As he made dinner, he kept the stories going, tales about terrifying creatures, aliens that supposedly lived beneath our feet. We hadn't even been sitting there 5 minutes when red lights flooded the van. My dad told me not to worry, that they were just checking us out, making sure we weren't a threat. Nothing to be scared of, he said. After a while, the lights shut off, and we were left in the pitch-black desert, just us and his stories. Then he said he was going for a walk, told me to stay inside, no matter what noises I heard. He wouldn't be long. But he was. And I sat in that van, terrified out of my mind, listening to the sounds outside. I couldn't see a damn thing with the curtains drawn, but I could hear everything. Some noises sounded mechanical, others natural, like animals moving around. But the one thing I remember most was the ground, how it trembled. Not like an earthquake, more like a constant, low vibration. Like a giant truck rolling past, over and over again. By the time my dad came back, I had no idea how much time had passed. But the second I saw him, I knew something was wrong. His face, his movements, he was shaken. And my dad never got shaken. He told me it was time to sleep. I tried asking what had happened, but he just said everything was fine. We'd be leaving in the morning, and no matter what, I was not to open that van door. If I heard anything weird, I had to wake him up immediately. The look in his eyes told me not to push for answers. Then came 3 a.m. I couldn't sleep. That tremor had started up again. That weird, almost rhythmic shaking. And the noises, low, mechanical. I sat up in bed, careful not to wake my dad, who was sleeping like a rock. I thought about opening the van door, just for a second. But I knew better. If my dad caught me, I'd either get my ass beat or be sent straight home. So instead, I did something just as bad. I lifted one of the blinds. I didn't know exactly what I was expecting to see, but at first, there was nothing. Just the same endless stretch of desert, silent, empty, completely lifeless. No movement, no shadows, nothing but the wind scraping against the sand. And then, I heard it. I can't even explain it. It was too fast, too sudden. First, there was this high-pitched sound, sharp, drilling into my skull like it was digging straight into my brain. Then came the mechanical noise, followed by a soft clinking, like glass bottles knocking against each other beneath the window. I was completely caught off guard by what I saw next. A face. It wasn't human, and it wasn't an animal. It was something in between, and it was staring straight into my eyes. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. The body looked animalistic, hunched and unnatural. But those eyes were human. Then, out of nowhere, a gunshot and a sound. Something between a scream and metal grinding against metal. I wish I could describe it better, but no matter how hard I try, I've never heard anything like it again in my life. And just like that, the thing took off, running so fast, it barely looked real. 3 jeeps came speeding after it, their headlights slicing through the darkness. By the time my dad woke up and looked outside, they were already far and gone. Needless to say, no one ever believed me. And over the years, I got really good at shoving those eyes back into the deepest, darkest corners of my mind. Until now. Now, I can't ignore what I saw anymore. Hey, Horror Spectator here. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications so you're always in the loop when new videos drop. We post 2 videos every week. If you're really into this content, consider sharing it with your friends. It really helps us grow this community. Now, let's move on to the second story. I never wanted to be involved in any of this. If I could go back and change that day, I would. But once you see something you're not supposed to, once you know something you shouldn't, there's no undoing it. You just have to live with it. Or try to, at least. It was 1998. I was working as a contractor for a defense company. Nothing glamorous, just logistics. My job was making sure equipment, supplies, and classified materials got where they needed to go. Most of the time, I didn't ask questions. I learned early on that asking questions only made things harder. If you wanted to keep your job, you did what you were told and didn't think too much about it. One day, I was assigned to a shipment going to Nevada. They didn't give me many details, just that I'd be driving a truck with highly sensitive cargo and that I was to follow all orders exactly. I had done jobs like this before. Restricted sites, high security. But this one was different. The clearance level was higher and the briefing was unusually strict. They made me sign extra NDAs and warned me that any deviation from protocol would have consequences. We drove through the night, a convoy of 3 trucks escorted by black SUVs. The route was carefully planned, avoiding major highways. We took back roads, cutting through miles of empty desert. By the time we arrived, the sun was coming up, casting a dull orange glow over the mountains. That's when I realized where we were. Area 51. I had heard all the stories, of course. Everyone had. But standing there, looking at the unremarkable entrance with a simple guard post and a few cameras, it felt different. Real. I wasn't supposed to feel anything. Wasn't supposed to be curious. But something about the place made my stomach twist. We were told to park inside a massive hangar. A few guards stood by as men in hazmat suits approached. They ordered us out of the trucks, had us stand in a line while they checked the cargo. I wasn't worried. I didn't know what we were hauling, and I didn't want to know. But then, something went wrong. one of the men inspecting the shipment shouted something I couldn't hear. The energy in the room changed instantly. The guards stiffened, hands moving toward their weapons. The men in hazmat suits scrambled, opening one of the crates faster than they should have. And then the smell hit me. It was awful. Chemical, metallic, and something else I couldn't place. Something rotten. A sound followed. Something soft and wet, like flesh shifting unnaturally. One of the hazmat men stumbled back, tripping over himself. His face, what little I could see of it through the clear visor, had drained of color. I wasn't supposed to see inside that crate. But in the chaos, I did. It looked human. Or at least, close to it. But something was wrong. The body was pale, almost sickly looking, with visible scarring across the torso. It wasn't moving. At least, I don't think it was. The sight of it sent a chill through me, but before I could process anything, someone grabbed me. I didn't even realize I had stepped forward until the guard yanked me back. Another man, someone in a suit, came out of nowhere. He was calm, cold. He leaned in close and said, "You didn't see anything. Understand?" Before I could fully process what I had seen, a man in a suit appeared, moving with the kind of precision that made it clear he was in charge. Without a word, he pressed a clipboard into my hands, the weight of it making my fingers tighten instinctively around the edges. At the bottom of the page, there was a space for my signature. No explanation, no discussion. Just an expectation. I hesitated, but only for a moment. The air around me had shifted, thick with something unspoken, yet unmistakable. This wasn't a request. It wasn't even an order. It was a formality. A final step in something already decided. My name went onto the page with a quick, uneven scrawl. The clipboard was gone before I had even let go of the pen. The man didn't linger, didn't wait for acknowledgement. But before he turned away, he made sure I understood. There was no need for raised voices or elaborate threats. The message was clear in the way he looked at me, in the way the others moved around him with quiet efficiency. There would be no second warnings. I nodded, my heart pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out. They pulled us all aside, ran us through decontamination, questioned us one by one. I stuck to my story. I didn't see anything, didn't know anything, just a driver doing his job. Eventually, they let me go. But the last thing they told me stuck with me. There will be no second warnings. I never worked another job like that again. I got out, changed careers, moved states. For a long time, I convinced myself it didn't matter. That whatever I saw was just a bad memory, a mistake, something my mind twisted into something worse than it was. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that crate, about the thing inside it, and I wonder, where did it come from? What was it for? And worst of all, was it really dead? A few years ago, I found myself in Nevada again, driving through the same lonely highways. I don't know what drew me back, curiosity, nostalgia, maybe just bad luck. But as I passed the endless stretches of desert, I noticed something strange. A convoy of black SUVs, just like the ones from that night, speeding down a back road. They weren't escorting trucks this time, just a single, windowless van. I watched them disappear into the horizon, a familiar unease settling over me. I don't know if I'll ever get real answers. Maybe I don't want them. But I do know one thing. Whatever they were doing back then, they're still doing it now. And some things are better left unseen. On September 16th, 1991, something happened in my life that made me experience fear in a way I never thought possible. It wasn't just any kind of fear. It was a deep, overwhelming dread that shook everything I was, and somehow, It shaped who I am today. From that moment on, I had to completely change my life. My name, my identity, the country I lived in. I left everything behind, even the people I knew. Friends, family, acquaintances. I had to start from scratch, with no ties to my past. And only now, after all these years, do I feel brave enough to tell this story. Even now, I do so under complete anonymity, as if the shadow of that night still chases me. Since I was a kid, I was always an introvert, someone who preferred silence over the company of others. This part of me made me a target for bullying, mostly because I was smarter than the other kids my age. The truth, though hard to accept, is that most kids who bully do so because they feel inferior and use aggression to cover up their own insecurities. The same thing happens in adulthood. But back then, what I knew was that knowledge was the only thing I had. No friends, no family support. Only school, classes, and books. And it was in those things that I found refuge, diving headfirst into my studies, looking for something that would give me meaning and purpose. At 17, something important happened. I entered a math competition at school, a contest that highlighted the brightest young minds. At the end, after I had won, a mysterious man approached me. He talked to me about a unique opportunity. If I was willing to work hard, I could have everything I ever wanted. He told me about the military, a full scholarship for college, and a high salary, way above average. For someone like me, coming from a poor family with no prospects, and being the first to have the chance to go to college, it seemed like a dream come true. My parents didn't hesitate for a second. When I told them, they quickly gave their blessing. And so, I enlisted in the military. The years in the military were smooth, even comfortable, as long as I followed orders without questioning them. The reward for that was the benefits offered, a stable, secure life. Over time, my area of expertise evolved into genetics, and I began working in an innovative and mysterious field where knowledge was power. I spent 7 years developing studies and experiments focused on the genetic improvement of various species. However, without going into too many technical details, I should say that the main goal of my research was improving living organisms, making animals stronger, faster, and smarter. The ultimate goal was something even more ambitious. Perhaps in the distant future, genetically modified humans. The work we did was fascinating, but at the same time, disturbing. And ultimately, it led me to an even more unsettling place. Area 51. I loved what I did. Science was something I was deeply passionate about. However, as time passed, I began questioning the ethical implications of it all. A growing sense of discomfort started to consume me. A feeling that I tried to ignore, but couldn't shake. I talked to some colleagues about it, but none of them seemed genuinely concerned. In fact, the last colleague who raised questions about what we were doing simply disappeared without a trace. Things started to feel even stranger and unsustainable. But my need for answers grew, and one fateful day, I made a decision that would change my life forever. On the night of September 16th, 1991, I took action. Without thinking, without considering the consequences, I stole my supervisor's access card, a card that would allow me to enter highly restricted areas of Area 51, places where no other employee, except for the highest-ranking officials, was allowed to go. I knew that by doing this, I was risking everything, but curiosity, the need to understand what was behind all the secrecy, left me with no choice. What I found behind those doors was something I never imagined could exist. In that lab, inside huge glass tubes submerged in mysterious liquids, were creatures that looked like they came straight out of a nightmare. animals, and life forms that I couldn't even identify. What I saw in that space, what I saw inside those tubes, were things that defy any rational explanation. I knew that what I was witnessing was something beyond the limits of possibility, something that no one should ever see. And it was at that moment, in a desperate impulse, that I decided to quickly return to the lab. Instead of running, I chose to lie down on the floor and pretend that I had been affected by a gas released into the environment as part of an experiment. I knew this was a risky move, but my only hope was that no one would notice anything strange. My first mistake was not realizing that all access in those facilities was strictly controlled. My supervisor would be questioned about entering that area, and being the only one there, my presence at that hour would eventually become the key to exposing my actions. My second mistake, the most serious, was believing they would swallow the lie that I was there by accident. They weren't fools. My life turned into a nightmare. I was interrogated, tortured. The accusation was clear. I was a spy, someone trying to steal precious secrets. I underwent tests and experiments that I don't even know how I survived. But there was a glimmer of hope in the chaos. A colleague, someone who had witnessed my attempt to escape, outraged by what was happening, decided to help me. He did the impossible to get me out of there, and against all odds, I managed to escape. I never knew what happened to him, but unfortunately, I live with the guilt of knowing that he probably didn't survive and risked everything to help me. I spent months on the run, always on the fringes of society. I avoided the big cities, hiding out in mountains and national parks, always terrified of being found. Finally, I managed to cross the border and get to Canada. And from that moment on, I disappeared completely from the map, severing all ties with the world I once knew. Looking back today, my life has never been the same. Fear, distrust became integral parts of my existence. The way I see the world has changed forever, and although I never fully understood what was really going on behind that door, one thing I know for sure is that whatever it wasn't right. And in the end, despite everything that happened, I feel a strange sense of satisfaction knowing I'm no longer part of that dark world.